This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. Broadcom is suing Netflix. Broadcom is apparently very unhappy that Broadcom's business is doing poorly compared to Netflix, who is doing well. And Broadcom is claiming that Netflix is infringing upon patents. And here's a picture. The following diagram illustrates how the playback process works. Number 1, something reports health status, learned routes, and available files. I'm assuming that's the OCAs, whatever that is. 2, there's a play request. 3, something in the cloud determines the required files, picks the OCAs, I'm guessing that's content, sends the URLs to a client device. The client device requests a file from the OCA serves files to client device. Have you ever been upset at how simple some of these patents seem? Like, should there really be a patent on me using an app to request a video and then my Google Chromecast requests the video from YouTube and plays it on my TV? Is that really patentable in the higher sense? Maybe I could see if there was some novel technology that was used. I don't know if Kurt can get in here for a moment. But maybe if there was like a more detailed patent. But if we're just talking about this, like your app makes a play request, so then the client device sends a request for that link to the content host, and then the content host delivers the content. That seems like maybe that's not patentable, but I'm no patent attorney. But that's what Broadcom has filed a 92-page patent lawsuit against Netflix for. When a Netflix subscriber initiates a playback session by selecting a movie or TV show and pressing play, the Netflix system determines which specific files are required to handle that playback request. Taking individual client characteristics and network conditions into account, the Netflix system picks OCAs that the requested file should be served from and generates URLs for these content hosts. I'm assuming these are the data centers that are around the world and the country, so that when Netflix has to serve you content, they don't have to do it from halfway around the world with great lag and going through many different routes. The Netflix system then hands over the URL to the client device, and the client begins requesting the files, and the content host serves them.
Hello, I'm a blackleaf. You asked for me.
Yes. What do you think of this level of patent I'm displaying on my screen right now? You might have to wait a second for the stream to catch up, but it's basically a block diagram or network diagram of how requests are sent from a client device to a content host, and then the content host picks a proper server and then sends a URL back to the client device, which requests the file. That sounds overly simple and very much like normal, this is the way the internet works stuff for Broadcom to have a patent on it. And I just wasn't sure if maybe you could give us an opinion off the top of your head, or if I'm just putting you on the spot too much.
Well, I'll say a couple things. The first is that these drawings are often not particularly helpful in the IT space in terms of understanding the invention. They are very 30,000-foot high-level overviews,
okay,
and often do not reflect the details of the invention. I don't know if they are meant to, but they do give a very simplistic review of how the thing worked.
Okay, that's fair. And here I am making a simplistic argument that it's too simple.
Yeah. So to answer the underlying question as to the patentability, what I would do is I'd look to the actual claim language. So I'd look to, where it's actually numbered and say, I claim, and all the steps of it. And then I'd have to interpret that language in light of the specification in terms of what it actually provides for and stuff.
Okay.
So I can't, based on what I see here, make a determination as to whether or not this should have been a patent or not, because on the one hand, I see patents like this every single day. This is what I deal with is computer databases, computer search engines, and stuff like this. So on the one hand, I see like this every day, but a lot of these things are allowable. And it depends on the detail. The devil is very much in the details when it comes on patent.
Okay.
It can be very pedantic.
So just as an example, I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you can respond, feel free. Claim 1 of the 121 patent, and that's just the last 3 digits of the patent.
Yeah.
A network for processing data configured by a controller to form at least one display pipeline therein by dynamically selecting use of at least 2 selectable nodes from a plurality of selectable nodes and dynamically concatenating the selected at least 2 selectable nodes in the network together. So they're concatenating them together, wherein said at least one display pipeline has an independent data rate and a flow control module enables said independent data rate. That sounds an awful lot to me like a server is going to pick from a number of options, like a number of say, content hosts, at least 2 of them, and then concatenate those 2 URLs together and feed them to a client who can then try one of them and see if it works, or try the second one if the first one fails.
Yeah, the way I would read this when we're talking about a network and nodes. So when I think about a network and I think nodes, I think about the computer or the server or the thing that's operating in between. So the network server or the home computer are nodes in a network in the internet sense. So we're looking at 2 of these nodes in this network, 2 computing devices basically, from a plurality of selectable nodes. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in this network, which makes sense in a computer network. So, okay, we want to dynamically, so on the fly, pick 2 of them, and we want to concatenate, which I'm assuming as connect would how I would normally read that.
Okay.
Connect these 2 nodes in the network together. So we've got a bunch of nodes in this network that are connected in one sense because they're in the network. But what we want to do is we want to essentially connect them directly. So this sounds like a direct messaging or direct connection that we're going to form on the fly.
Yeah.
And we want to do, we're in at least one of the display pipeline has an independent data rate and flow control. So this pipeline that is now going to connect these things has this independent rate and flow control that enables this independent data rate so that we can do the connection between the nodes in an independent data rate, an independent flow rate that's independent of the network as a whole. So that sounds also like a direct messaging, direct connection thing. And so that's how I would interpret that. I would agree with you that it's broad on its first blush. I'd agree with you that that covers a lot of stuff on first blush.
Now, is it possible that it sounds broad because we're in 2020 and now these things are normal and this was filed back in 2002?
Oh, yes. Oh, and you might have to go back before that because it says filed on 2002.
Okay.
Okay, the provisional is 2002. That was the next question I was going to ask, is the priority date, which I'm assuming is the earliest date. So all these things are interpreted as the date of priority, which I'm assuming is December the 9th, 2002, because they would have told me otherwise.
Okay.
So when we look at these terms, we're trying to interpret the state of the art as it existed in December the 9th of 2002. Which is obviously a lot different than today because, Netflix didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, social media didn't exist. There's a lot of different things. And that is both good and bad for the constraints of it. It's good because, they get a lot more scope, but it's bad because they can only get as much scope as they invented. They can't get more than actually described in their specification. They can only get as much invention as they actually invented. So I would presume that Netflix has created new technologies since 2002 that are probably of a different scale or a different kind to this and doesn't read on it. But, when you're looking to, is this a valid and then, of course, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, I'd have to read this in light of the specification to see if any of these terms are specifically defined, because you can act as your own lexicographer, so you can specifically define these terms.
Okay.
So these are like generic definitions I'm sort of giving on the fly. But I could look at the specification and say, oh no, what they actually meant was whatever. And then I'd say, well, how similar is that to what Netflix is doing or not? So, I always presume the patent is valid. I presume that more so because of the time period. And, this kind of dynamic rate control thing seems like a technological problem that was being created around this time period. The idea of people being able to share media, especially video files, because that seems to be what it's directed to. In 2002, I'm thinking like Real Player, basically where everyone remember Real Player. It's like that's basically the state of the art technology in 2002. So on the one hand, it's like it's probably valid because there's not a lot of technology in this time period. But on the other hand, it probably doesn't read on Netflix, all else being equal, because, a lot has changed and the need for things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
So,
and isn't it possible that Netflix is actually using technology that has licensed a patent on these things, and maybe Broadcom doesn't have insight into Netflix's internal operations?
Oh, well, most definitely, because a lot of these things are very hidden to the user, and the type of patents I deal with, you as a user would probably never know what's going on. It's all behind the scenes. It's all on the back end. It's totally invisible to you. And so it's by that token, it's very difficult for this company to make a determination that Netflix is doing any of these things, because what it looks like on the surface and what's actually happening in reality can be very, very different. The appearance does not reflect the back end. If it did, my entire field would be, be dead, because there'd be nothing left to do. But I deal with this all day long, and so there's a lot of stuff dealing with it, and a lot of it can be very application specific. I deal with stuff on very sort of esoteric application specific stuff in terms of how application calls are happening to databases and so forth and so on, and it can get very, very niche. But if it's an invention that's niche, well, that's invention as much as anything else. So it's a very broad patent. I'll agree that it's a broad patent, at least it appears to be. On first blush, it appears to be a broad patent. It appears to cover a lot of grounds, but then I'd want to interpret and lay the spec to figure out what they actually invented, and then properly interpreting it to what they actually invented. And then I'd want to go see what Netflix is actually doing and how the degree to which it does or does not apply.
What you're saying is we can't jump to conclusions.
Yeah, that
takes all the fun out of my balloon.
Yeah,
you asked a lawyer for his opinion, and you gotta. It depends. You really should have known better.
No, I think I knew and was just sort of playing off of it.
And one of my favorite things that like amateurs will do in this space is like there's like the ubiquitous figure 1 and like the ubiquitous paragraph 20. It's just like they're not actually that number necessarily. I just use them. But the ubiquitous figure 1 is basically what we just kind of saw, right?
Yeah.
There's computers connected to a network, and it looks like, well, this looks suspiciously like the internet. Therefore, they're claiming the internet. I'm like, no. And then the ubiquitous paragraph 20 is, there exists a network with computers and processors and a memory and, the hard drives and things. And these are connected to each other using these. And it's like, oh my God, they're trying to claim the internet. I'm like, no, this is background material. They're telling you like all this stuff because it's necessary background. Please stop. You don't know what you're doing.
So how about here's some more necessary background. Here's the 245 patent, a method for communication comprising receiving from a user device by a network management server via a communication network a request for service. Sounds pretty generic to me. Determining multiple routes for delivering content associated with said requested service based on a provisioning profile for said user device. Okay, that could mean some kind of more personalized, scope, or what's the word I want to use? Like quality of service or bandwidth availability or ping or something tailored to a specific user device. And delivering said content associated with said requested service via said determined multiple routes. So it sounds very, very much like quality of service that is being tailored a little bit to the user device.
Yeah, and I consider that to be a pretty significant limitation personally. I mean, talk about the provisioning profile for the device. So I was like, oh, I want to figure out which route to communicate this message through based on the device specific and what the device specific needs, which the way I read that is independent of the network conditions. So I have multiple different ways to send this traffic. And I want to pick some of these multiple different ways based specifically on the kind of user device. I'm like, well, that seems pretty significant because the user device is constraining my ability to do it based on its own selfish needs. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like something.
So it sounds like we really can't make a really good conclusion about whether the Broadcom patents and Broadcom lawsuit is frivolous or not, despite multiple news sources claiming like, oh, Broadcom is just butthurt that they didn't get into the set-top box market the way that Netflix has gotten into the market.
Yeah, I mean, it can be anywhere on the continuum from total BS to meritorious. And I've certainly seen both, but my my hot take on the way that people report these things is the news media at large doesn't have the first clue about patents. I'm sure you've never had that feeling when it comes to like reading their understanding of copyright law.
Oh yeah.
So you don't understand what I mean, right?
We've copyrighted every melody, and it gets millions of views, and it's like, no, you didn't copyright every melody. You copyrighted the output of a computer program on a hard drive, and you are never going to be able to enforce. Well, the opposite of enforce, right? They wanted to open source it and public domain it, so then they can claim that those things are all open source and public domain. It was more of a digital protest, but it was couched as, you can now use any melody. Guess what? You can still use any melody, and the Katy Perry judge overruled the jury and confirmed that. Anyway, so that's what we're looking at there. We will follow the Broadcom lawsuit and see what Netflix's answer is. There's also a possibility that Netflix might simply pay some kind of a license fee or work out a settlement or a deal with Broadcom, which is more or less exactly what Broadcom wants. Now, maybe we could find out what Broadcom stock is doing. Maybe Broadcom is getting desperate. Let's take a look here. Broadcom stock. And I guess this should be taken with a grain of salt because everything looks bad right now. So yeah, if you take a look at Broadcom stock on the NASDAQ market over the past month, it's going down just like everything else is. So you can't really go by that. So again, Broadcom stock didn't seem to be doing that bad. So no, I'm not sure that this is a desperate plea for something. I mean, going to 5 years out here, they certainly had their ups and downs, but they were at a high point before this situation, and they seem to only be continuously growing. So I don't know that the headlines that Broadcom is like ailing in the set-top box market and is trying to sue Netflix, I don't know if that's a great take. That just might be clickbait. So that's my hot take. That's Kurt's hot take. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is Broadcom just making a patent troll style cash grab, or is Netflix really potentially, I mean, we obviously don't know yet, but is Netflix potentially using the same technologies to effectuate a tailored quality of service plan that seems to be covered by the Broadcom patents, which Kurt says are, at least at first glance, possibly a little bit broad. But we'll see. So thank you for joining me. That is our show. Let us know what you think of that story in the comments below. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and this is Lawful Masses, your favorite legal news and education channel. As we grow and expand our operations and get ready to take this thing to the next level, I want to thank the people who are making this possible with their financial support on patreon.com/ljfrench and sponsus.com/law. Thank you in the month of March to the $50 plus supporters: Wes Delj, Aspernari, Video Remonetized, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Kyle Mudrak, Michael Pearce, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, Daniel Perez, Blackleaf, Joe Tyson, Benjamin Hitov, Stephen, Ottah, Cute Grills in Your Area, Longreach Jones, Zachary Chaney, Mullen PC, and Anders Thorenfeldt. And thank you to the $5 plus supporters who are scrolling on the screen in front of me and on the LED panel behind me. I love you all. I'll see you in the videos that drop. Stay safe, wash your hands, keep your social distance, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you all. Bye.